today is the last day of the Olympics, and I don't know how many of you have been watching. I am not an athlete and have never been an athlete, so my interest in the Olympics is how amazing it is to me that people can do the things that they do. And my favorite is the gymnastics. I was thinking about it this morning because I have, I thought it was one, but it's actually 2 hummingbirds that are kind of flying around my flowers. They temporarily light on the hummingbird feeder, and then they just sit on kind of a fence that I have. And when they fly, they hover in the air and they move. Anyway, that's what the gymnasts remind me of when they're flying through the air. Like, you know, how is it that they're able to stay suspended like that? And their costumes remind me of hummingbirds too. They're always glittery and beautiful and graceful. So this year, I found it interesting. I heard a couple of interviews with Simone Biles and a Brazilian gymnast whose name is Rebecca Andrade, I believe is how it's pronounced. And both of them, in a little bit different words, said that the presence of that other woman, Simone Biles said, it's kind of stressing me out, but in a good way. And Rebecca said the same thing, that having someone else who is equally excellent or maybe better was pushing them to excel. And I don't know if you saw this, it was kind of amazing after the final gymnastics event, which was the balance beam, that Rebecca Andrade got the gold, Simone Biles got the silver, and Jordan Childs, although this seems like now it's in contention, got the bronze. There's a photo that was posted of Rebecca, who had the gold, on her top tier podium, and then Simone and Jordan bowing down before her in graceful respect. And when I saw that photo, I thought, this is absolutely the best about competition, is that these 2 fantastic gymnasts recognize that here's this other fantastic gymnast who is the best. And I even heard that the Louvre Museum reposted it and said we should have this on the wall of our museum. So to me, that's kind of the best expression of being envious of someone. It's like, I'm this good and this person is this good, and I am envious of their success. The worst part of envy is kind of like the Mean Girl episode. Someone has something that you want, and instead of respecting and admiring them, you get angry, resentful, and try to tear them down. And I had kind of forgotten about this, but it's been years now. I think it was in the 90s. There was a figure skater named Tanya Harding who orchestrated an attack on someone who was her rival, because rather than using the positive expression of envy to say, oh my gosh, this woman is really, pushing me to excel, it's like, well, if I injure her, then I'm going to be the top. I mean, that is the worst. And that kind of envy is associated with the expression being green with envy. And I don't remember when I first heard that, but I was always curious about, why is green associated with envy? Sometimes it's called a green-eyed monster, and I have green eyes, so it's like, I hope they're not talking about me. And so I looked it up, and apparently the expression green with envy started with Shakespeare, who gets credited for a lot of things. Something that he wrote, beware, my lord of jealousy, it is the green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on. And other things that I researched said that in Shakespeare's time, health was associated with humors, which are fluids in the body, which is kind of interesting because it's very similar to traditional Chinese medicine that relates health to the different organ systems. So green is the color of bile, which comes from the liver, and the liver is associated with anger and resentment. So when someone mentally and emotionally is out of balance with anger and resentment, it affects their liver, which then kind of turns them green. And so that's the kind of medical or physical explanation of why green is associated with envy. Well, there's other things that are green also, good things like plants. And plants always grow, or at least have an urge to grow and reach toward the light. And probably everyone here has heard you're supposed to eat green vegetables, right? Well, do you know why green vegetables are so healthy? They're right in the middle of the color spectrum. So remember Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, that's the rainbow. And green is right at the center. So when we eat all the colors of the rainbow, you probably have heard about that too, it means that we're nourishing every system of our body, and the green foods are the ones that are the most balancing. So I thought about this in terms of the different expressions of envy and how that kind of negative expression of envy can be balancing to produce the positive expression of, you are inspiring me to be better. So I just have to say this, I know sometimes in the metaphysical community where we promote positive thinking, sometimes people don't want to admit when they have so-called negative thoughts. But I'm not going to ask for a raising of hands. I would bet that every person in this room at some time has experienced envy, and maybe not the good kind. Like, why did he get the promotion when I am better qualified for this job? Or why did she get that guy when I am so much smarter and more attractive and magnetic? Or how did she get that article published when I know I'm a much better writer? So what I have found is that when we have those internal monologue kinds of thoughts, instead of denying them and saying, oh, but I want the best for her. Well, yes, I want the best for her, and I still wonder why and how she got that article published and I didn't. So what about, instead of just asking it as a kind of snarky question, we ask, like, how did you get that article published? And maybe you find out that they sent it to 100 different magazines and then finally got it published. Or maybe you ask the person who got the promotion, how do you think you got that promotion? And they say, well, I learned to ask questions. And then maybe I find out, well, I just kind of do my own thing and I don't ask questions. And if I ask more questions, I might get that job. So some years ago, I had an experience. I had developed a seminar on communication and relationships. I traveled all over the Midwest presenting it. I taught it at social work conferences. I taught it at professional development conferences. And a friend of mine knew about, I guess it was a weekend program that was at a university in Springfield, Missouri, that was on communication, and so she suggested to me that I apply to teach part of the program. So I applied, and I put a lot of time and energy into my proposal and giving all of the experience that I had, and I got turned down. And I knew someone else who got accepted, and I had those kinds of thoughts. It's like, why did she get accepted? Because I know I'm a better teacher than she is, and I know I have more experience than she does. So in the rejection letter, email letter, the person who said, I'm sorry, your proposal was not accepted, at the very bottom, it said, if you have any questions, feel free to call. And so instead of just feeling rejected, I thought, okay, I do have questions, like why did you turn down my application? And so I called. And I'm so glad I did, because the man who was in charge was very kind and very complimentary, and he said, clearly you have the experience to teach this. I can see from your references, I can see from what you've done that you're qualified, but I have to tell you, this is an accredited university, And you've cited these credentials from non-accredited institutions. So I have a bachelor's degree in women's studies from the University of Michigan, which is an accredited institution. And then I have master's and doctorate level degrees from the School of Metaphysics, which is a non-accredited institution. And I had put all of those on my resume, and he said, you would have been much better off just citing your BA from the University of Michigan and then putting the experience that you had with this non-traditional education instead of saying their degrees. Because in the accredited academic world, those are not considered degrees, and so in our view, and he was really very diplomatic about it, because he wasn't saying you're a sham, but he was saying in the accredited educational world, it looks like a sham when people are citing these degrees that are not accredited. So I felt disappointed that I didn't get to teach at this seminar, but I am so grateful to that man for being honest, because it changed how I operated from then on when I was sending in proposals to do professional things. And it helped me to be able to get speaking engagements with police departments, with other universities, with social work organizations. So I was very grateful for him, and I was grateful to myself. Tim sang about loving yourself. I think sometimes being grateful to ourselves is also challenging. I was very grateful that I listened to that feeling sorry for myself question about why didn't I get picked, and I responded to it by asking and finding out. And I think that that is one of the productive ways that we can use envy when we have those questions in our mind, you know, why didn't this happen? Why did that person get it? Is to really ask, you know, maybe ask the other person, maybe ask ourselves, because that helps us to grow. And if you think about plants, I have a lot of plants inside and outside. And some of my plants flourish. Sometimes they flourish for a while and then they stop. And I must admit there are times I have a tendency to blame the weather or blame the plant, when the truth is I'm the one that's growing them, and so it's really up to me to learn, you know, what does this plant need? Does it need more water? Does it need less water? Does it need more attention? Am I giving it too much attention? I actually learned with one of my plants this year. I had the same one growing last year, and the leaves kept getting yellow and falling off. And this year, I neglected it a little bit more, meaning I didn't water it as much. So, I mean, I always think more is better when it comes to water, but that's not true. And so what I found out with this plant is that less is more with the water. And so it's beautiful, and the leaves are, it's a caladium, which it has pink leaves, not flowers. And so I just love the fact that you can get color in leaves. In terms of ourselves, is that I think in our urge to grow and develop and excel and improve, sometimes we can do it completely with an intrinsic motivation. But I would say most of the time that's not true. That there's usually also some kind of external stimulus that inspires us to do a little more, to be a little more, to improve a little more, and that helps us to go beyond a plateau that we might get to. And that's kind of what I was hearing when I heard these interviews with Simone Biles and Rebecca Andrade. I mean, Simone Biles coming into the Olympics, people were already calling her the GOAT, the greatest of all times. And here she has this competitor who's pushing her to say, maybe I'm not the greatest. You know, maybe there's someone else who's greater than me, and to inspire her to do better. And the same thing with Rebecca. So I appreciate the people and situations in my life that give me that kind of You know, in the cartoons, sometimes they have a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other. It's like, okay, is this the devil that's telling me there's something wrong with that person and I'm really better? Or is it the angel that's saying, maybe that person is really better, and so what can I do so that I can better myself? You know, not to tear them down, but to better myself. I think the more that we can appreciate all of those ways that we're inspired, it can help us to fulfill what we're here for. Because what I have read in many different scriptures is some version of the idea that we were created from a source. Some people call it God, some people call it source. There's different names for it. And that we were created to be like that source that created us, which means that we have the potential, not that we are God, but we have the potential to be God-like. And in this human form that we have, we're not there yet. None of us is there yet. So every time that there's some kind of inspiration to say, okay, well, how can I just be a little bit better? How can I grow a little bit more? How can I improve a little bit more? It helps us to fulfill why we are here, and so then it brings us joy. And to me, that's the most positive expression of growth, is that it helps us to experience joy and to appreciate this life that we have.